All right, here we are. We are live in 2024 on the YouTube live stream. Appreciate everybody coming in. Hope you had a great, happy new year. 2023 is behind us, and we're ready to go for 2024. As we always do, I want to make sure you jump in the chat. Let us know that we sound okay. The volume's good. You can hear everything as we're at my house. So only way I'm going to know that is if you jump into the chat. Let us know if we are up and running. No technical difficulties. We don't want any of that. My sons are here to help out along the way. We got a bunch of good topics to talk about, a lot I want to get to here, including the college football national championship game, final week 18 of the NFL, which is a big deal, and some of the other breaking news storylines, some media issues that we got coming in here. So far, so good from Carol. Appreciate that. And the video and audio is okay as we're getting ready to roll. Again, I want to know how your New Year went. What'd you do? Did you get out of town? Were you able to stay in town? Did you go on some exotic trip? Did you go to a game? I've always mentioned that if you go to a game, I want to hear from you. If you went to any of these big NFL games, if you've gone to a college football bowl game, the Rose Bowl, or maybe if you went to the Sugar Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, whatever it was, let me know how that worked out. And hopefully you're healthy, you're prosperous, and remember, set goals. One thing I do at the beginning of the year, I've said this with my sons, and I do it, is I don't throw it out, but I take my old calendar of 2023, I write down some new goals, and I start planning out the year ahead, trying to understand where I'm going to take a break, when am I going to go on a trip, what am I going to do, and then set goals so I can kind of put together a vacation, maybe go see my parents, which I'm doing next week. Going to head out to Naples, Florida next week for a few days to see my mom and dad, who, if you listen to the shows, you know they're 85 years old, and I want to see them. And I haven't seen them since the summertime, my nephew's wedding, so I'm going to take off and go and spend 3 or 4 days with them, and I'm hoping to do a lot more of that coming up here again. Where to begin? I think we should begin. The Pro Bowl was just announced a couple of hours ago. I'm not going big on the Pro Bowl. They destroyed the game. The game is a waste. It's a video game. They play golf. They play tic-tac-toe. They don't play football, but getting nominated and getting into the Pro Bowl is a pretty big deal because a lot of players get paid incentives and they make money, and they have a lot of bonuses that are tied to that. So as I saw a couple of the announcements of the Pro Bowl as we open it up, a couple of things I wanted to say as we open up the show. I'm not into this who was snubbed, who didn't get in. You didn't get into the Pro Bowl because you didn't have bigger numbers than the players at your position. Normally, they don't snub this, but whenever you're voting on something, the vote can get skewed. So Ari Mirov, who's an NFL insider, I'm going to work off of his feed. He said the teams with no Pro Bowlers, none. The Packers, the Patriots, the Washington Commanders, and obviously the Carolina Panthers. How about that? No Green Bay Packers in the Pro Bowl and no Bill Belichick Patriots. That says a lot. I'm not going to go through special teams, even though I'm excited my buddy A.J. Cole, the Raiders, got in. The defensive backs, a couple to mention, Sauce Gardner of the Jets, Patrick Surtain. These are from Jalen Ramsey, goes in with the Dolphins, Justin Simmons, Micah Fitzpatrick, Kyle Hamilton. I think he's a great player. Wow, I love the way he plays. He's fantastic. Also, Deron Bland, who had all those pick sixes. He broke the record of my buddy, Eric Allen, who's a finalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Congratulations to Eric Allen. Buda Baker, he gets in. Linebackers, T.J. Watt, Khalil Mack, Josh Allen, Roquan Smith, and Patrick Queen. You think Baltimore's any good? On the NFC side, Micah Parsons, Danielle Hunter, Hassan Reddick, Fred Warner, and Bobby Wagner. How is Bobby Wagner still a Pro Bowler this late in his career? He is a lock for the Hall of Fame. D-line, Mad Max Crosby. Mad Max. Love that. Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, Quinnen Williams, Chris Jones. Yeah, that's a good group. Nick Bosa, Montez Sweat in the NFC, Javon Hargrave, and Dexter Lawrence. Let me move past, and the offensive linemen are really important. Centers are important. Creed Humphrey's in. Jason Kelsey of the Eagles is in. Tight ends, George Kittle, Sam Laporta in the NFC. Travis Kelsey, David Njoku. Was Kelsey worthy of a Pro Bowl? Yeah, I'll leave that to you. That's something for the chat. Did Travis Kelsey have a Pro Bowl year, in your opinion? Let's get that going in the chat. The wide receivers, Puka Nacua is in. He deserves to be in. What a career. What a year he had. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. That's nice. Keenan Allen, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill. Hopefully Tyreek Hill, he had a really rough day today as his mansion burned down. Most of it did in South Florida. Thank God his family is safe. That was an ugly incident today. Pro Bowl running backs, Christian McCaffrey, DeAndre Swift, Kyron Williams, Juszczyk makes it. Rasheem Mostert, what a year he had with the Dolphins. Derrick Henry. Is Derrick Henry a Pro Bowler this year? And your quarterbacks. Here we go. Quarterbacks for the Pro Bowl. NFC, Brock Purdy, Matthew Stafford, Dak Prescott. Yeah, Dak and Purdy were fighting for the MVP all year. Lamar Jackson, Tua, and Patrick Mahomes. It's a big deal that Tua is a Pro Bowler and Justin Herbert is not. Justin Herbert obviously got hurt. Got to give Tua and Mike McDaniel a lot of credit. Tua is a Pro Bowler. Not a lot of people thought that would ever be possible. A lot of people were down on Tua when he came into the league. So there are your Pro Bowlers here as we open this up. Mark Vollmer says, no, Kelsey doesn't belong in the Pro Bowl. Again, I got to break down the numbers here. Taking a look at some of the names that are here, but I didn't think from watching him this year, and it's nowhere near a great year for Travis Kelsey, but possibly a Pro Bowler. He wouldn't have got in on the NFC side, I can promise you there. I mentioned Lamar Jackson. It's a good time to get the MVP debate going as we start off with this live stream. I think Lamar won the MVP against the Niners. And going into that game, the Niners might have had the front runners over Lamar. At that time, it would have been Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy. Purdy threw 4 interceptions in that game. They usually give that award to a quarterback. Now, Lamar's going to sit out the final game and still win the MVP. Yeah, I think he's okay to sit out this final game and win the MVP. I also think Baltimore is making a big decision to rest their starters. John Harbaugh talked about that today. Jump in the chat. Where do you stand with resting starters? There's only one team in each conference that gets a bye week. Okay, assuming it's the Niners and Baltimore, as we know, Niners and Baltimore. I'm all for resting the starters, but then you don't play the following week. Okay, so this week you're preparing for your starters not to play. And as we record this, we're sitting here on Wednesday. So the rest of the week, you're just practicing, you're not playing a game. The following week, you're practicing and not playing a game. The following week, you're practicing to play a game. So you're going on 3 weeks without playing football. You tell me, if you're a Baltimore fan or a 49er fan, do you like that philosophy? Now, Kyle Shanahan made an interesting point. Not everyone's going to sit for the 49ers. You got to field the football team. You got to get a football team out there to participate. But if you're going to sit your quarterback and you're going to sit your running back, that's smart. You got to rest your players for the postseason. But in general, rust is real. Because if you get a bye week and then you don't play for 2 weeks and you play a team that comes into the playoffs hot, you're playing a team that's coming in hot like the Cleveland Browns in the AFC with their defense, or in the NFC, if the Rams are on fire with Matthew Stafford and they are grooving and you haven't played for 2 weeks, you better be ready. But if I had to choose on it, I'd love that number 1 seed. Let's go back to before Christmas, right around there, because it's been a while since I talked to you here on the live stream. What do you think of Dallas beating Detroit? As Detroit checked in a player who obviously the referees and that group of refs screwed it up, and Dan Campbell decided to go for it a couple of times to win the game, and the Dallas Cowboys won. I was very passionate that night when I was watching that, and I was watching it with a bunch of friends. They opened up a new casino here in Vegas called Durango Station. I was in the sports book, and the place was going wild, and Detroit thought they won the game. The referees made a costly mistake and Dallas won. And why is it a costly mistake? Because if Dallas lost, you were talking about the Eagles being the front runners to win the division and have the home games throughout until the NFC Championship game come through Philly instead of Dallas. So the officials really screwed that up at a very high level here. And that officiating crew is going to do the first game of this weekend, the Ravens-Steelers game, which is a pretty important game. So I was kind of surprised by that they didn't get suspended, that officiating crew, throughout the entire postseason. Obviously, the downgrade is significant, but there's only so many officials, and they needed them for the game coming up here this weekend. So for Dallas, that was the night that Jimmy Johnson got inducted into the Ring of Honor as a Dallas Cowboy. And when that happened, I was pretty impressed. And there was a bunch of conspiracies going on that, that's the night that Jimmy Johnson helped the Cowboys win that game with that egregious call when Detroit should have won. It had nothing to do with Jimmy Johnson. It had nothing to do clearly with a conspiracy, but it had everything to do with poor officiating. When I look back on 2023 in the NFL, there's two things I want to talk about with you. Number one is the poor officiating. This is fact, not fiction. There's more flags than ever. All of these games are judged by penalty flags, and games are decided with under 2 minutes to go on penalties. There's a lot of gamblers who watch me and listen and are listening to my shows in Vegas or nationally. And we all know that the officials, if they make a bad call late, it affects your bet. And for a lot of gamblers out there, the gambling process this year was a down one. A lot of gamblers lost money, especially the public, unless you were betting unders in all these nationally televised games. But jump into the chat here. I want to see someone with some life here. Tell me what you think about the level of officiating that you specifically saw this year. How bad, in your opinion, was the officiating this year to years past? And did it affect you as a fan? Because I know a lot of fans who are getting really pissed off and have shitty experiences watching the games because the officiating takes over these games. For me, I work for the Raiders, and as I watch a lot of Raider games, the Raiders were pretty good this year with their penalties being down a bit since Antonio Pierce took over. But believe me, 25 years with the Raiders, I've seen them get screwed when it comes to poor officiating, and even before that. But poor officiating, I think, has been horrible this year. I think it's worse than ever. And case in point, it was the Cowboys stealing that win in their building because they got help from the officials late in that game. How bad has the officiating been this year? Let me know. Normally, I throw in a phone number for you to call into. I got the chat right here that you're ready to jump into, and I want to hear from you on that one. Cody says, if it's a close game and the penalty decides the outcome, score more points. Don't let your opponent close. Well, that wasn't the case for Detroit. Detroit won that game. They didn't need to score more points. They went the length of the field. Dan Campbell wanted to win the game by going for two. Problem I have in that game is Dan Campbell shouldn't have went for two after they didn't get it the first time. After they should have won the game, and the referee screwed it up on an offensive lineman clearly checking in. Right after that, Dan Campbell should have kicked an extra point and played for overtime. I mean, Detroit had all the momentum. The pressure was on Dallas. Detroit and Dallas were already in the playoffs, but Detroit secured the division. I would have played for overtime. The original Surfer Bob says, maybe I'm just an old burnout that get off my beach guy, but I want no instant replay in sports. None, nada. Well, Surfer Bob, I don't know how you could say that, because think of all the times they screw up games. At least when it comes to instant replay, we can find out if they get it right or wrong. Now, this whole Dallas-Detroit thing is not a good example of it, but when it comes to getting a toe down in the back of the end zone and toe tapping, or if it comes to seeing if a ball hits the ground or not, I need to get that call right. Thank God for instant replay. If we didn't have it, and it was just a judgment call by a bunch of referees in their 60s who aren't athletic enough and fast enough to track down the play and make the call, I couldn't disagree with you more. I couldn't disagree with you more. Thank God for instant replay. I want to use more. The only thing I don't think you can use it is on holding. There's holding on every play on the offense and defensive line there is. I don't think you can have instant replay for that. But I think instant replay under 2 minutes to go for pass interference is something I'd like to see. But we're able to do that. But instant replay was there for tennis, for football, for baseball, to really just see if the ball's in bounds or not. That's the nature of instant replay. Was the baseball hit fair or foul? Did it hit the foul pole if you can't tell it going over? What happened at first base? Bang, bang, play. Let's take a look at it at home plate. Did he get in or not? Football, the same thing. Was the ball in bounds? Was the player in bounds? That's why I like instant replay. And I think the challenges are pretty good overall. I watch a lot of NBA, and NBA games could get really slow with all the timeouts. But having the challenge makes a lot of sense for me. El Fuentes. It started when they made gambling legal, it seems. Well, that's a really good point. Gambling being legal now. I think these leagues understand how important it is to get it right. With all that money at stake. But have you ever met a gambler who's not going to gamble because he got ripped off in a bad beat on a bad call by a ref? I see a lot of gamblers bitch and moan about that, but they don't quit gambling. They just get pissed and they withdraw more money and bet more. But you're right about that. Legalized gambling has changed everything. The level of bitching and moaning when it comes to legalized gambling is at an all-time high. When it comes to officiating, because of the amount of money that's bet on all of these games. So let's take a look at a couple of games here because we're late in the week. Saturday, January 6th, Steelers-Ravens. Ravens aren't going to play their starters, and it's a massive game for the Steelers. Pittsburgh now a 4-point favorite in this game. Let me make sure I get all the lines right here as we move forward. So this is where it truly affects the outcome of a game. When a team like Baltimore, who's obviously the best team in all of football, I think Baltimore proved they're better than the 49ers. And all of a sudden, we're at a point now where the point spread is skewed because one team decides not to play their best players. I mean, tell me that doesn't have an effect on gambling. How would you like to have the look-ahead line or the early line on that, and the game changes there? So let me make sure I get the right lines here according to Wager Talk if we take a look at this. So, yeah, currently Pittsburgh is a 4-point favorite, 3.5 at the Superbook at the Westgate. That's the line that I look at. Houston's a 1-point favorite at Indianapolis. I just saw Indianapolis knock out the Raiders and continue on. That's a massive game. Houston at home with C.J. Stroud being a favorite is a pretty big deal here. A couple other games. Dallas, 13-point favorite over Washington. That'll be Ron Rivera's last game. Niners, -4 over the Rams. Considering the Niners aren't going to play everybody, I like the Rams in this game, considering where the Rams are as a playoff team, getting the points, not to win, but to cover the spread. The big one opened up Miami -1. Chubb is out. Buffalo's now a 3-point favorite. Let me make this point clear. I think Buffalo's better than Miami on a neutral field in Orchard Park or Miami. I said this earlier today on my radio show that Miami was a Super Bowl contender before two of their best defensive linemen were eliminated for the year due to injuries. I don't see how the Miami Dolphins can overcome these injuries to the defensive line with two of their best players. So I obviously don't like Miami going forward, and they've had a hell of a year. Philadelphia is a 5-point favorite over the Giants. That game doesn't mean much. Cleveland has nothing really to play for. Cincinnati, because Cleveland's not going to play a lot of their starters, as a 7-point favorite. Chicago, Green Bay is a big one. Green Bay wins and they get in. Why is Green Bay only a 3-point favorite? Anybody want to jump in there on the chat if you're a gambler? Why is Green Bay only a 3-point favorite in that game? Vegas, Denver, Las Vegas, 3-point favorite. Both teams are eliminated from there. There's no Russell Wilson. The Raiders are playing for Antonio Pierce's job. I'll get to that in a second. Coming up here, Tampa Bay, Carolina. Tampa Bay, that line opened up -6. It's 4.5. Tampa Bay in a must-win situation right there. And then we'll have the NFL wildcard playoffs starting January 13th. Well, let me catch up on a couple of these chats that are here. Carol says, seems to me that the gambling aspect would put pressure on the NFL to get the calls right. I think there's a lot of pressure on the NFL to get the calls right. They want to get every call right. And so do the officials, because if the officials don't get it right, they get downgraded. They could lose their job and they could lose the assignments. I know the NFL takes this very seriously. Walter says, just gamble more. We're suckers. I know that. I live in Vegas where everybody's addicted to video poker. Cody says, JT, are the Raiders bringing back Jimmy Garoppolo next season? I would doubt it. Jimmy Garoppolo is a healthy football player now, and he doesn't play behind Aiden O'Connell. I got that wrong with Jimmy Garoppolo. I really like Jimmy a lot. Got to know him a little bit, and I cannot believe that the Raiders were in playoff contention and Jimmy Garoppolo didn't play and he was healthy. That was a decision by the organization not to play Jimmy Garoppolo late and develop Aiden O'Connell, who played some decent football. But Jimmy Garoppolo's had a much bigger career than Aiden O'Connell, and the Raiders didn't put him in there down the stretch. Giants Niner fan says Taylor Swift deserves to be in the Pro Bowl instead of Travis Kelce. Well, that's the reason Travis Kelce's in the Pro Bowl. Taylor Swift. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And Jordan Graybow, if I got that right, or Grabau says, do you believe the Browns will go far in the playoffs? That's one of the best and toughest questions I'll answer. No, I don't think they'll go deep because, Joe Flacco was on the couch this year. He's playing great. There's a team that have lost a lot of good players, and the Browns have the number one defense in football. So the way I describe the Browns is they're a team that you don't want to play, but they're a team that shouldn't go far in the postseason. So I see the Browns going one and done, winning a playoff game and being out. And I like their defense. Believe me, I think their defense is good enough to keep them in games. But when I look at the top of the AFC, I don't think the Browns can beat Baltimore. They might have to play them early. The AFC South, the Browns could beat any of those teams. As we looked at this year from Indianapolis, Houston, and Jacksonville, what a disappointment. I thought that Jacksonville would win that division by a bunch. Do I think Joe Flacco can go into Kansas City and beat Mahomes? No, I don't think Joe Flacco can go into Kansas City and beat Mahomes. And when it comes down to the Browns, do I think they can win could they go into Buffalo? If Buffalo ends up, or can Buffalo go into Cleveland and beat Cleveland? Yes. So it's a nice story this year with them, but I truly don't think that the Browns, so I got a bunch of Browns friends, are going to go very far overall. Jump into the chat, and maybe that's a good topic to give me so far, because we got one more game, and we're going to do a lot of this in the postseason. Dr. Pepper here. The sleeper team that I like now is the team that I picked to win the Super Bowl, not this year, but the last 2 years. I really like Buffalo. I think that Buffalo, if they end up beating Miami, which they will, and win the division, and get a home game in Orchard Park, are going to get all their mojo back, all their momentum. And I know that Buffalo can win at Kansas City. I know the weather won't be a problem for Buffalo and Baltimore. And I think Buffalo is no longer, they're never a sleeper. They've been a really good team. But they went through a lot of adversity this year. DeMar Hamlin from last year into this year. The 9/11 comments from 2019 from Sean McDermott that leaked miraculously out of nowhere. That was a big storyline. And then another big storyline for me with Buffalo was Josh Allen with all of his turnovers, and now he's starting to clean up his game and play right at the right time. So when I look at all of these teams and how they're playing as of late, I wouldn't want to play Buffalo. I'd want to play Philly. Philly's playing terrible football. I look at these other teams that are going to get in there from whoever it is. We look at the 9-7 Colts and Texans. The Lions. Lions are interesting. Lions are very interesting because now after getting ripped off in Dallas, not only are they a playoff team, but they're really pissed off. They're really upset. And Dan Campbell's already got those guys sky high. So I think Detroit is going to be really interesting going forward. Can Detroit beat San Francisco and Santa Clara? No. Can Detroit win and beat any of those other NFC teams that are there? I think they can beat Philly now. And I'm going to stay with my Super Bowl pick initially. Who was it? Come on. Dallas Cowboys. I picked the Cowboys before the start of the year. I love their roster. I think Dak had a great year. He's a Pro Bowler. I thought Mike McCarthy cut down on his interceptions, did a really nice job. I think the defensive secondary that they have is good. I like the Cowboys' offensive line, defensive line with Micah Parsons. I like everything they do. But the Cowboys have struggled beating anybody good on the road, and the Cowboys are going to have to win on the road. That's why Dallas winning the division is so important, so they can get a home game. And getting a home game would be essential for Jerry Jones, as Jerry Jones is trying to win some playoff games for the first time in a long time. Let's get into the college football playoff. What'd you think? It's going to be Michigan and Washington. I thought that game, Michigan should have lost. Alabama's got to be furious. Nick Saban, a legendary defensive coach, coaching defensive backs, and McCarthy went the length of the field, and they went for it on fourth down on their side of the field, and they picked up a first down and ended up getting down to the goal line, tying the game up and winning in overtime. Alabama had the game won. They had Michigan pinned back. All they had to do was get a turnover, a fourth down stop, and I give the men of Michigan credit for winning that game. Jim Harbaugh deserves a lot of credit for the way he was motivating his players, making plays. The team made clutch plays with the game on the line. If you're an Alabama fan after Georgia was eliminated, Alabama could have said they beat Georgia and Michigan back to back. And I'm not saying Alabama was the better team, but they should have been able to win that game against Michigan. They couldn't stop the run in overtime. And how about that last play? Milroe running a quarterback draw on the fourth down. You're telling me that's the fucking best play Alabama has with the season on the line? You don't take that quarterback and sprint him outside the pocket with a throw pass option, or throw run option? What the hell was that? Did they think they were Tim Tebow in his prime with the quarterback draw? Going to do the jump pass or run it in? Man, Alabama fans got to be pretty upset about this. Those games are pretty good. And then Washington, with Michael Penix Jr., they have a receiver, Roma Dunze, who played football here. You might see I have some Bishop Gorman memorabilia. He played high school football here in Vegas. Rome did at Bishop Gorman, and I've been watching that team closely. And Michael Penix Jr. played so well, thrown for over 400 yards in that game. I was blown away. I'm normally not blown away by a college quarterback. Caleb Williams blew me away last year, not this year, but he was already playing for the NFL last year. But Michael Penix Jr., even though he's had serious shoulder injuries and knee injuries already, he changed my mind as Washington won and beat Texas. He had the perfect game at quarterback. Did you see some of those balls he threw and how great he was? I would take him as my starting quarterback right now out of college. I didn't think so. I think, the injuries, he's had a lot of injuries. Maybe stay away from him, wait for him to drop. He's going to be a top 10 player or a top 11 player. If you need a quarterback and you don't get Caleb Williams or Drake May, you go get Michael Penix. I know he's a little bit older. Is he? Someone correct me if you could Google it. Is he 24 or 25? Michael Penix. I think he's 23 or 24. The Georgia quarterback, Stetson Bennett, was 25. But I'd take him. He looked great. Washington, yeah. Jesus says he's 24 years old. That's getting up there for a college kid. I'm sorry. You get a kid at 24 years old, but now where you got guys playing until their late 30s, you can get a good 5, 6, 7 years out of a quarterback. But Penix just throws one of the best deep balls that I've seen. All right, let me catch up on a few. Jordan says Bama choked. He is right about that. Jesus says Raiders stay pat in the draft and draft Penix Jr. Yeah, I think so. Look, I'm not a big fan of trading up unless the Raiders think they can move up and get an elite quarterback. And I just told you, Penix, he looked elite to me. If the Raiders, who were thinking about trading for C.J. Stroud, weren't able to get him, and I guess the Raiders were really in the hunt to get C.J. Stroud, their former GM, Dave Ziegler, and they didn't get him, I do the same thing for Michael Penix. Matter of fact, I like Michael Penix better than C.J. Stroud as a deep ball thrower. I do. In regards to the coaching carousel and the hot seat, we'll get into more of that next week as my son just showed up. A lot of people are asking me what I think about Antonio Pierce as the head coach of the Raiders. He's the interim head coach. I have to interview him tomorrow at 11 in the morning for the last time this regular season. I think he earned the job. Thought he went out there and did everything he had to do, but I'm not Mark Davis, the owner, and he's going to have to make that decision. People are speculating about Jim Harbaugh, Bill Belichick. Belichick isn't a fit in Las Vegas. Who are some of the other coaches? Washington. I think the best jobs out there are Washington because they got new ownership. I hope if the Raiders stay with Antonio Pierce, that'll be great. If not, Mark Davis spends a lot of money on coaches, and the question comes down to the Chargers. This is the biggest issue of the offseason, everyone. The Chargers play in LA, where Shohei Ohtani, LeBron James play, all the other stars that play in LA. The Chargers are irrelevant. They would be relevant if they got Jim Harbaugh. All that's going to take is Dean Spanos to write a check for Jim Harbaugh. Dean Spanos already gets an enormous check from the NFL every year for the television revenue. All he's got to do is take that money, probably get rid of Joey Bosa, get rid of Bosa or Mack or Derwin James or another player and put that money towards a coach. Harbaugh, the only reason Harbaugh would not go to the Chargers is the same way that Sean Payton wouldn't go, because of the way the Chargers don't spend money and they have no brand. If you want to be a head coach of a team that has no brand, well, then go do it. Maybe Jim Harbaugh can make them an elite team. I think Harbaugh is a hell of a coach. A couple other topics here if you want me to get into it, get into the chat. This guy, Cody, says, Penix will be off the board by pick 15, you think? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think he'll be around. Jordan says, I don't think J.J. McCarthy is an NFL quarterback. I disagree. I think he could be Mac Jones. He could be a quarterback like anybody out there in this league. I think he's going to be an NFL quarterback. I just don't know if he's going to be an instant starter here. Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson got done dirty. Got done dirty by Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos, flat out. I'm an expert on that topic. I watched Derek Carr get benched his last 2 games as the Raiders because they didn't want him to get injured. But Denver's deal was a little bit different because Denver and Russ, they were playing good. You know, Russell Wilson wasn't having his best season, but he was playing okay. He's the top 10 rated quarterback. It's hard to find those guys. And as I reported a number of times, Sean Payton wanted nothing to do with the personality of Russell Wilson. Nothing to do with him. You know, Sean Payton is a Kenny Chesney fan, drinking beers in the sand, having fun. Russell Wilson is not. And Sean Payton did not want to go to work every day, into work. And the first guy he had to spend his entire day with was Russell Wilson. He didn't get along with him. He doesn't like him. He doesn't hate him. I'm sure he has respect for him. He just doesn't want to be around him. Would you want to be around someone 18 hours a day if you didn't have to be? No, that's what happened. Very simple for those who don't get it. I think Russell Wilson is going to bounce back and be really good next year for a new team. He made some throws this year which were spectacular. So for Russell Wilson and a new system there with Denver, with Sean Payton, no, he wasn't Drew Brees in his prime. But he's a lot better than Jarrett Stidham. And they don't have a quarterback in Denver other than Jarrett Stidham. So this is going to define Sean Payton. This is going to be the reason Sean Payton becomes a legend in Denver, because he got rid of Russ and he turned the franchise around and they eventually win, or nothing's going to happen and they're going to run his ass out of that town after 2 more years because they weren't better after getting rid of Russell Wilson. Tell you, that Sean Payton has balls to make that move. He has balls to make that move. 1 or 2 more topics here before we wrap it up. If there's anything else you want me to hit in there, like to hear what Original Surfer Bob says, any Raider fan who wouldn't take Russell Wilson is flat out brain dead. That's an interesting topic. I don't think that Russell Wilson is precisely the culture of what Antonio Pierce wants now with the Raiders. But Russell Wilson's been a lot better than any quarterback to play for the Raiders in 20 years, other than when Rich Gannon won an MVP and played at a level which is as good as Russell Wilson when Russell Wilson was going to Super Bowls. Russell Wilson's a hell of a player. You don't have to like him or not, but you can't tear down his stats and his legacy. The whole other thing, media-wise, this Pat McAfee, Jimmy Kimmel situation that's going on, I'm not talking about it. Okay. The list, everyone wanted me to comment on social media about Epstein Island and the list and all that. I will not. There's going to be some young broadcasters who are getting a lot of trouble because they're commenting on that and they have no idea what they're talking about. It's a very serious topic, a huge topic that shouldn't be debated on sports media platforms. And I think we're seeing that with Aaron Rodgers and the backlash now, and what's going to happen with ABC, Disney, Bob Iger, the Academy Awards, ESPN. It's ugly. So I would just remind everybody there are people who left sports radio because they love clickbait and they want to talk politics. There are other people that want to talk about these really big, gossipy, serious issues. I don't. Nothing good could happen. You see my beautiful home here? I want to keep my beautiful home. I want to have a great life. And I will not comment about any of that on the record. No doubt about that. Who's going to be my pick? Because I think we might be on again, but in case we don't do this, I think Michigan's going to beat Washington because they're more physical. I just think up front on the offensive and defensive line, Michigan, they're just bullies. They're nasty. They can run the ball on short yardage. I don't think Washington can. Washington has a better quarterback and better receivers. So Michigan better be sure that they don't get beat deep downfield the way we saw Texas get beat. You know, Texas has an outstanding front. I love the Texas pass rushers and what they had, and they were neutralized enough by Washington so Penix could make throws. I think he'll do that against Michigan, but I think Michigan is going to push Washington around. I think they're just going to be a little bit more physical than the Washington Huskies. One thing to keep an eye on in this game, Washington will go down in a shootout. They will embrace the shootout. One thing about Washington, they're not going to change their philosophy and start handing off the ball in the third quarter. If they're trailing, they are going to open up the spigots and go crazy attacking deep ball shots downfield. And Michigan's defensive line is going to have to get to Michael Penix Jr. just the way Michigan got to Alabama's quarterback with all those sacks. So they have 5 sacks in the first half of that game. Ace Boogie says Washington has NFL receivers. Michigan is tough, and it'll be a good game. Yeah, just like I said. Will the Washington receivers have the ability to get open deep downfield? Will they have the ability to attack deep downfield and do something special there? I don't know. I think they're going to have a couple of shots early in the game, but Jim Harbaugh in Michigan went through a lot of adversity this year, and I think they're going to find a way to win that game. All right, anything else you want me to hit on? Pretty good. Looking to get everybody to subscribe. We appreciate everybody who's in here today. The goal in 2024, and I want to put a number on this, but I'd like to get this really flowing. I'm going to be pretty busy here coming up with the Super Bowl in Vegas where I live. So with the radio shows I have, the podcast and platforms, I'm going to really make sure I concentrate on this, try to do a YouTube live stream from Radio Row down at the Super Bowl to show you all behind the scenes. I think this is my 27th Radio Row Super Bowl. I've been missing one for COVID. Been going to the Super Bowl. Now it's in my backyard here in Vegas. What we'll do next week is we'll jump in and we'll do a wild card playoff preview. We'll look at the moving lines and the point spread. We'll look at the teams that are in the playoffs and get your opinion on who's going to win this thing. But for now, from my family to your family, I wish you a great 2024. Have a great new year. Anything else about this, please subscribe. All I want you to do is subscribe to this YouTube channel. And do me one more favor, and please make sure you share this with everybody else. Make sure other people in your YouTube verse know about this. And if you could just share it and get them to subscribe, that would help me out in a big way. Oh, and thanks to Modelo, our proud partner. Got a little Modelo behind me. A Modelo, the fighting spirit, the #1 beer in America is Modelo, and they are a proud partner of our YouTube stream. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.